This Lime Rock Edition M3 is a very special car, not just because of its paint job, which is quite orange, or because of its performance, which is quite good. It's a special car because of where it sits and where it will sit in history. This car represents over 40 years of the M Division, nearly 30 years of the M3. And rumor has it, this will be the last naturally aspirated M3 that the M Division produces. So we thought it fitting to celebrate this car, but in order to do that, we have to know the cars that led up to it. So we've gathered an E46 M3. We have the exceedingly rare and ultra cool E36 M3 lightweight. And last but certainly not least, we have an E30 M3. The car that started it all. This week on Ignition, we're driving all of them. This is where the M3 story starts, with the E30. And as far as beginning stories go, this is one of the best. It's incredible to think that a car like this was even built. It couldn't happen today. You couldn't just say, we want to go racing, let's build a couple thousand of these things and see if they sell. Thankfully, it did sell because it created a brand and a series of cars that are frankly incredible. What is it that caught on with the E30? It's a number of things. We'll start with the engine. You know, it's just over 2 liters. It doesn't make a lot of horsepower or torque. We're talking about 193, 195 horsepower or so, and only 170 pound-feet of torque. But it's not the specific output of the engine. It's the character of the power band and how that power comes in. The engine wants to rev. It wants to go to redline and sing. It makes a really nice sound when you do that, and the way the power swells when you get in the power band, especially when you're coming out of a corner, is really rewarding. This car is light and nimble and can basically take whatever you can throw at it with the throttle. It remains balanced and composed and really fun to drive because of it. That's the crucial thing, I think, with the M3, is its balance and its ease of access. It's a car you can really lean on and push, and the way the whole chassis and car responds is just really invigorating. The steering has a lot of turns lock to lock, so you kind of have to throw it way over to the side to get into a corner properly, but it firms up very nicely when you get to limits of adhesion. In fact, the whole car sort of swells up right when you get to limits of the front axle. It feels really nice and communicative. E30 M3s these days have such a high asking price. And if you want to buy a piece of automotive history, a piece of automotive culture, something that has some charisma to it, you might consider buying one. But as far as pure driving thrill goes, it's really good, but I'm not sure it's worth the amount of money that these things cost these days. We'll find out which one is. With the E36 M3 came massive growth within the M Division. Recognizing potential sales, BMW capitalized and the car reflected it. It shared body panels with the standard 3 Series. It wasn't so overt, only the details were different. It was heavier than the E30, but it was also faster and more capable. This is the lightweight, the original CSL. There's only 125 of these in the US. They're a little bit over 200 pounds lighter because they don't have radios, they don't have air conditioning, they don't have leather seats, they don't have sound deadening. None of that silliness. They have aluminum body panels instead. They have a massive rear wing. And they're pretty cool, if you can find one. Now, as for the way it drives, again, we have very nice balance over the car. It feels like I can never ask for too much. I can always push it as hard as I'm comfortable with, and knowing how rare it is, let's be honest, I'm not that comfortable pushing it. Still, it welcomes a bit of aggression. It likes it's okay being thrown around. You can short shift it and it's still okay. It doesn't lust for the high RPM stuff, although that's fun too because the engine gets that nice metallic rasp. In fact, that sound seems to be a trademark of the M3. And in fact, the more I drive these cars, the more I'm noticing the commonalities between these cars. One is, of course, the incredible chassis balancing. One is the engine sound. And one is the sense of control you have over the car. Of course, Europe got a more powerful version of the straight six because they had a more advanced head. They had variable valve timing, they had individual throttle bodies. The US didn't get that because it would cost too much. We almost didn't get the M3. It took a letter writing campaign by the BMW Car Club of America, a big reaction from enthusiasts who basically pleaded to get this car, and that's why we have it. We can be thankful to them. I want to talk about the balance, though, of this and the E30. They're modestly powered cars. They don't kill themselves with horsepower, but they have very nicely controlled chassis. That's a crucial thing with these cars. The saying goes, you want an engine that isn't as fast as a chassis. You always want a little bit more capability in the chassis because that means you can soak in the power band of the engine without getting into situations that are dangerous. You can enjoy it more. I like that. Now when we get into the E46, you'll see what happens when you add a lot of horsepower. It sounds so good. Along with substantial performance improvements that arrived with the E46 M3, BMW also made a concentrated effort to differentiate this car from the standard 3 Series. It shared fewer mechanical components and it wore different body panels, including a domed hood and fender flares, which accommodated the wide track and equally wide 18-inch wheels. With the E46, we have the transition from a very light, controllable sports coupe to a very serious, big German sports coupe. This car feels a lot bigger than the E36 and the E30. It feels heavier, but it has one monster of an engine too. Now it makes 333 horsepower. It also has this nasty little mid-range at about 5,000 RPM. If you have any steering in and you're in second gear and you go flat, be prepared to put some counter steer in because that rear end loosens up really quickly. Now, that's what happens when you add more power. The thing I love, though, about this engine is that sound, that metallic, raspy sound. It sounds so sweet, doesn't it? Now, why we're talking so much about the engine is because it seems to me that this is when the dial switched from chassis to engine. Not to say that this isn't a great chassis. It is fabulous. It's so much fun to drive. But now we have equal or maybe a little bit more engine in there. So now you have to be a lot more cautious on throttle. Now, what does this retain from the E36 and the E30? It still has that really easy sense of control. It still drives like a smallish car, although it's not. It still has that metallic, raspy racing engine note. And it still is just an absolute sweetheart to drive. between this and the E36, it feels like there's a massive leap in performance, in capabilities. This car feels so much sharper, so much more responsive, so much faster in every way. The thing is, this doesn't feel like a direct replacement for the E36, though it is. This feels more like the predecessor to the E92. Woo. With the E92, BMW seemed to have improved on everything that made the E46 so great. It was larger, but not that much heavier. Its V8, for example, weighed less than the straight 6 it replaced. But it combined its newfound power and usability so deftly that we even called it one of the best all-around cars in the world. Now, hopping in the E92, the most impressive thing, most immediate thing is the engine. It comes on so quick. The torque delivery is so insane. Of course, this engine likes higher revs. It likes being high in the power band, but as soon as you get on the power, it's just a powerhouse. It is absolutely incredible. The way it sounds, the way it delivers power, it feels like a race engine. And it sounds absolutely incredible too. It is just a monster of an engine. How can you not like a 4-liter V8 that redlines at nearly 9,000 RPM and sounds like the way this thing does? It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. It's addicting, addicting, addicting. The thing is, when we edit all this footage together, you're gonna look at this thing and think it's a drift car because all we're doing is power slides. What that means is that this car is flexible. It's easy to drive in whatever situation you want to be in. If you want it to be a drift car, you can do that. If you want to be responsible and smooth, you can do that too. Although, let's face it, it's nowhere near as fun as doing burnouts. One of the biggest complaints lobbed at the M3, or continually lobbed at the M3, is that the power level keeps increasing, weight keeps increasing. When is it going to stop? Is it ruining the car? This isn't the E30. It's not that kind of car anymore. It's evolved into something different, something incredibly more capable, and I think just as satisfying to drive. Drive these 4 magnificent cars back to back, and through the tire smoke, you catch glimpses of the commonalities that make them so desirable. It isn't the number of cylinders or the horsepower, as those have changed greatly, but it's the character of the engine, how it sounds and feels as you near redline. It's not the amount of grip, but the control and precision, and how the chassis describes the road to you. These driving characteristics have made each of these cars a benchmark of their time, and some of the most enjoyable four-wheeled machines on the road today.
dead tire. You might say it's dead tired. Huh? Huh? Yeah.